According to the Entertainment Software Association, 227 million people played video games during the pandemic as a way to distract themselves and to de-stress. But when does the fun become an addiction? The World Health Organization actually recognizes video game addiction as a real mental health issue. They label it as a gaming disorder that affects millions of people around the world. And they say the difference between healthy fun and addiction is if the activity is having a negative impact on your life, like it was for my next guest. Adair says that by the age of 21, he was already addicted to playing video games for over 10 years, and it affected every aspect of his life. He had a strained relationship with his family. It brought on depression, caused him to drop out of school, and it nearly drove him, he says, to take his own life.
Gaming was a way for me to distract myself from everyday life. As a kid, school was very difficult for me because I was bullied. I didn't feel like I belonged. Games were a place for me to escape. They were a place where I felt in control, where I felt like I was someone that mattered. Throughout high school, I became a highly competitive gamer. It fulfilled so many of my emotional needs. I would play 16 hours a day. I became consumed by it. My parents were really concerned that all my focus and all my attention went to gaming. I was this unresponsive person. I no longer interacted with them socially or anyone else. They tried to forbid me from playing video games, but I just got angry and hostile. I eventually dropped out of high school, and when I turned 19, I hit rock bottom. I was depressed, I was anxious, and I had no motivation. I didn't see the purpose in living any longer, and even wrote a suicide note to my family and friends. Thankfully, I was interrupted by a text from a friend, and it was in this moment that I realized I need to get help. I really want to live my life with purpose, so I began to educate people on the risks of gaming addiction. I wanted people to know that they weren't alone, and that they could gain support.
Please welcome Adair to the Tam family. He joins us from his home in Thailand. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
And thanks for joining us from Thailand. I don't even know what time it is there, but thank you for being here. Listen, it's so interesting, like with Michelle, our guest who lost her daughter, the technology was your addiction, but the technology also saved you because, as you pointed out, you got that message from a friend at that dark moment of your journey.
Absolutely. I think that the key message here is that technology can be a force for good, and it can also be a problem. It's about identifying how it can be effective in your life and just managing the risks associated. But technology is here to stay, so we need to learn how to use it properly.
16 hours of gaming a day. How did that build incrementally? Was it, a couple of hours here and there, and then suddenly you find yourself in that 16-hour plus zone?
Initially, gaming was just a fun hobby I had after school and playing hockey. But it was when I began to experience a lot of bullying when I was 13 years old that gaming became an escape. And as I withdrew from school and stopped playing hockey, gaming filled all the rest of my time and eventually really was just everything I did.
How do you describe, because now that we know it has been identified as an official addiction, how do you describe the high? Help me understand what that feels like when it comes to gaming.
Gaming is hyper-stimulating. It provides you with a flow state. For me, it's something that also fulfilled a lot of my needs. So I could feel a sense of achievement, be social, I could see constant measurable growth, and also feel a sense of purpose, which provided me with a lot of motivation. And so it was the combination of all of those needs in the hyper-stimulating activity that just allowed me to play all day, every day, and not really even think it was a problem at the time.
I know that you talked about at some point becoming hostile toward your family, much like people who battle substance abuse addictions. There's a level of, you're trying to take this away from me, you're upsetting me, and it becomes destructive for the relationship. Tell me about those moments of hostility directed at your family.
My poor family, and shout out to them because they've been incredible on my journey, but I was just very unresponsive. My parents tried everything they could to help. They tried to talk to me about it. They tried to limit it. but I would fight back. They grounded me from the computer one time, so I put a password on the computer so no one got to use it.
So
I
you
ran away from
retaliated
home.
against the family.
Exactly. I realized that if they grounded me, I could ground them back. And it's really embarrassing, but it was the case. Yeah.
So how are your parents dealing with this? I mean, you were a teenager, and now you obviously knew more about technology than everybody in the house, and you're locking people out of the computer.
Well, I think that's one of the big challenges that families face today is that often they feel very alone. Parents tell me all the time, no one really understands. They say, just take the games away. But I heard from a family this week, and their child, when they took it away, put his head through a wall. And so it's
Oh.
not as simple as that.
It isn't as simple as that. And that's why I wanted to talk with you, because I know that you've traveled the world giving examples just like that, because so many parents will watch and say, just take it away. Or a relative, well, he's addicted or she's addicted, just take it away. It's not that simple, because it is an addiction. And coming up next, how Cam's journey to free himself from his gaming addiction led him to be an international speaker and now a leading expert who helps others identify the addiction they have to video games and how to beat it. More with Cam next. Welcome back. We're having a very interesting conversation today, talking about the digital distraction that impacts all of our lives. And in some cases, with our guest today, it's ruined theirs. I've been talking with Cam Adair, who says that his gaming addiction affected every aspect of his life. It strained his relationships. He fell into depression and lacked motivation, even contemplated taking his own life. Cam, take me to that moment that you've described where you thought life was no longer worth living because of the gaming addiction.
For me, I just felt like I had no hope. I was just in so much pain, and as much as gaming allowed me to escape, it didn't fix any of my problems. So my situation got worse and worse and worse until, like you said, I found myself writing a suicide note.
Mm.
And I was very fortunate that my friend sent me a text that night, invited me to go see a movie, and I had this big epiphany realizing that my situation was very serious and I needed to ask for help.
How do people, how is gaming addiction treated? We talk about alcohol, or this 12 steps and some of the other addictions we know that people will check into rehab. How is a gaming addiction, especially this modern version of it, treated?
It's complex and depends on the underlying conditions that are often there, like anxiety and depression or ADHD. Support groups are available not just on Game Quitters, but there are also 12-step groups online. Therapy can also be effective, such as cognitive behavioral therapy, and there are some rehab centers around the world, including in the United States.
Are you seeing young kids with this type of addiction? I know oftentimes we have this image in our head of a prepubescent boy, 13-year-old type. Are you seeing younger age group kids?
The most common age we see is actually young adults, often young men who are going off to college. They were able to get away with it in high school. They had parent supervision and monitoring. But when they went off to college, they really began to struggle. And so it's 18 to 24-year-olds primarily, but I see all ages.
18, because they don't have anyone saying, hey, you're spending too much time on it. So I actually, in the commercial break, again, we're live, I'll be honest, I said, can you bring my phone out so I can check my phone? I did that in the commercial break. But at the end of the day, I will often look at my phone to see how many hours I've spent on, social media. Are there those kinds of components? And forgive me if this is an easy answer, but are those kinds of checks and balances on video games where you can monitor how much time you've been on?
There are some. And so, for instance, on your phone, you could use your screen time app if you have an iPhone to track the amount of mobile gaming that you have. Also, online platforms like Steam do have tracking. There are some parental controls, but I still think that because this affects young adults, it's a lot easier for them to not be tracking their play.
Interesting. You discovered that there are or were four main reasons that motivated you to play games, and you identified them because you believe that other people have this same thing. What were the four?
The first was temporary escape. So gaming allowed me to escape, to relax, to feel a way to navigate my stress. They were also social, so I didn't feel like I was missing out socially. I was playing with friends online. They gave me a sense of achievement, and they gave me a sense of purpose. And it was the combination of those needs that really made it fulfilling for me.
Well, you found new purpose and new fulfillment. You became the founder of Game Quitters. By the way, this is the largest support community for video game addiction and serving members around the world, 95 countries. And you've published articles. Could you have ever imagined that 95 countries, thousands of people, TED Talks now would be your path? I mean, your life did not end that night that you had planned so that it could begin again to help other people.
That's the decision I made that night, was that I wasn't going to end my life, but I was going to learn to live it to the fullest. And
Wow.
honestly, it's a surreal. Thank you.
Wow.
It's
And
a
listen,
surreal.
Go ahead, I'm sorry, what'd you say?
It's surreal now. And, but knowing it's making an impact and hearing from families who no longer feel like they're alone really makes a difference, not for them, but also for me in knowing that it makes an impact.
Cam, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it. Cam, Adair from Thailand joining us Ham today. Now, Cam was able to get help for his gaming addiction, but if you or someone you know is dealing with an addiction and has contemplated suicide, please call the number at the bottom of the screen.